1995 and 1998, 25 young people in Great Britain developed some unusual symptoms. They had difficulty standing, walking.
They too have trouble getting up.
Scientists don't know what's causing it or where it came from.
Mad cow disease.
Prions are virtually indestructible. Not even radiation can kill them. During that time, cows in Britain were undergoing a change in diet. They had been herbivores, but over time, their diets were supplemented with scrap remains of slaughtered sheep and other cows. The cows not only turned into carnivores or meat eaters, they became cannibals.
That there is no way of knowing what you're eating is safe.
Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's me here, Comrade Lavender here, with another Pure Evil Deep Dive Files video. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive of the mad cow disease outbreak, capitalism, Oprah versus the beef industry, true crime, etc., and the science behind all this, and why it was, capitalism's fault. So let's get started into this anti-capitalism deep dive video. Before we get started, my videos relating to the topic at hand will be on the screen right now. I highly recommend checking out the pet industry pet food files because it has something similar to the mad cow disease outbreak when it's talking about how pet food is made. So yeah, I would recommend strongly watching that video because it's really closely related to this topic, but it's just the pet food portion of other animals, euthanize animals, being in pet food instead of human food. So I would check that video out if you're interested. So let's get started into this YouTube video. Are you becoming afraid of the grocery store? If you are, it's no wonder. You have mad cow disease, avian flu, and mercury in salmon, and other fish products, glyphosate, pesticide that causes cancer, a human carcinogen in cereal, forever chemicals in your orange juice, big pharma trying to keep you sick at every twist and turn, working with big food to poison the public. These are the latest dangers. The mad cow disease outbreak was traced to cows eating feed that had been made with the brainy leftovers of other livestock, including sheep and other cows, a practice now banned worldwide because of human consumption. This is a case of capitalism because cows are herbivores, not carnivores, so it makes no sense why they were eating sheep and other cows. So it's a capitalism-caused outbreak. Between 1986 and 1989, a disease swept through British cattle herds. The disease became known as mad cow disease. Scientists began to suspect this was somehow related to a human illness. The disease was arguably one of the most significant animal diseases in the 20th century, with over 180,000 cattle being affected. Over 4 million head of cattle were slaughtered in an effort to contain the outbreak, and 178 people died after contracting it through eating infected beef. A political and public health crisis resulted in it. The British beef was banned from export to numerous countries around the world, with some bans remaining in place until as late as 2019. A California neurologist, Dr. Stanley B., said that both humans and animals were suffering from mutated proteins known as prions. Bovine spongiform BSE is a neurodegenerative disease of cattle caused by misfolded proteins known as prions. Symptoms included in these animals include abnormal behaviors such as trouble walking, weight loss, and eventual paralysis. Prion diseases such as BSE are universally fatal. The time between infection and onset of symptoms is generally 4 to 5 years, and time from onset of symptoms to death is typically around weeks to months. While the inconclusion of brain and spinal cord tissue in MBM increases the likelihood of the infection, when prions are transmitted from an infected host to a new host, they convert normal proteins into prions. Therefore, the outbreak is believed to have originated in the practice of supplementing protein in cattle feed by meat and bone meal. Scientists find evidence that sheep can cause mad cow disease. Feeding cattle rendered protein fats produced from the carcasses of dead scrapie-infected sheep or other cattle with previously unidentifiable transmittable spongiform TSE. The first known prion disease was found in sheep as far back as the 16th century. It was dubbed scrapie disease after the characteristic manic scratching of their fleece and wool that many sheep victims displayed. What this could mean, the author said, is that scrapie isn't really capable of spreading to cattle per se. Rather, the sheep have scrapie also generate another kind of prion that can be infectious if it ever ends up entering cattle. Either way, it's the strongest evidence yet that mad cows came from originally mad sheep, and it's possible for a prion to be transmitted from cow to a person via beef consumption, infecting people too. Once symptoms occur, first depression and hallucinations, and eventually Alzheimer's and dementia and loss of motor control functions. Patients that have this disease survive for about a year. In late 1994, a number of people began to show symptoms of a neurological disease similar to CJD, a fatal disorder that occurs naturally in a small percentage of people, though usually only later in life. This new form of the disease would go on to be identified as variant VCJD, occurring primarily in younger people via caused by eating contaminated infected meat. The first known death from it occurred on May 21, 1995, when 19-year-old Stephen Churchill died, though the UK government continued to emphasize the safety of British beef, and in September 1995 concluded there was insignificant evidence to link BSE and VCJD. It was not until the March 20th, 1996 that Stephen Dordell, the Secretary of State of Health, announced that VCJD was caused by eating infected meat. 178 people would go on to contract and die of the disease. Another victim, a skier and a martial artist, Alderd Mboyi, showed discipline, grace, and considerable athletic ability and skill. So his family was mystified and then horrified and mortified when French teenager began exhibiting fits of rage all of a sudden and started stumbling around his home in the late 1990s. Soon he couldn't remember things and his speech began to falter. It was like his mouth was stuffed full of food and he was trying to get out his words but he couldn't, his mother told reporters. And in April 2001, he died paralyzed and comatose. The one-time catless pig, Oprah Winfrey, beefed with the other catless pigs in the Texas cattle industry. Winfrey's Texas beef began in April 1996 when her talk show aired an episode on food safety. A segment included discussion of bovine diseases, commonly known as mad cow disease, which had recently killed cattle in England. Howard Lindman, a vegetarian and animal rights activist, predicted on the show the disease would eventually plague and spread into the U.S. beef industry. Oprah Winfrey declared in that discussion, "Has just stopped me cold from eating another burger. I'm stopped." The segment, which also included a clip from the beef industry expert, was widely viewed as having contributed to a drop in cattle prices. Members of the cattle industry were furious at this, as was one of their biggest cheerleaders, U.S. Energy Secretary Rick Perry, who was then the Texas Agriculture Commissioner. Within days, Perry wrote a letter to Texas Attorney General Dan Morales urging the state to take legal action against laymen under a Texas law that was less than a year old. Throughout the early 1990s, about a dozen states adopted veggie libel laws that made the person liable for making false claims about the safety of food. The Texas legislature passed such a law in 1995. The economic livelihood of our beef producers is at stake, and I trust agriculture can count on Attorney General's office to enforce the laws of the state in Texas, Perry said at the time. Well, while Morales publicly criticized the statements made on Oprah Winfrey's show as baloney, just pure baloney, he said Texas couldn't pursue legal action under the law. Members of the Texas cattle industry soon stepped in and filed a lawsuit against Oprah Winfrey and others, alleging more than $10 million in damages. Paul Engler, the head of Emerald-based beef and pork production company, was the lead plaintiff in the lawsuit. For the more than 170,000 residents of Amarillo, Texas, the visit from Oprah Winfrey was both exciting and bewildering. Imagine what it was like to show up one day and there was 22 satellite trucks around the center of town, recalled Republican State Secretary Kel Singer, who was Amarillo's mayor in 1998. Not only did the case involve one of the world's biggest celebrities, but on the other side was an industry that was a massive employer in the area and region. And on February 26, 1998, the jury voted unanimously in Oprah Winfrey's favor. Years later, e-coli said he believed suing Winfrey was the right decision despite the outcome. The outbreak caused by the rendering industry to the attention of the public for the first time and emphasized their importance in the food supply chain. Prior to BSE, the RF tallow was traditionally used in the manufacture of candles and soaps, whereas the protein meal was used as a protein supplement in animal feeds. The rendering industry essentially provides a service to the livestock and meat industries, and for many years it was termed the invisible industry because it was operated outside the glare of public scrutiny and legislative controls were limited. If the MBM was cooked, i.e. to dry the feel of the operator, the process was thought to be working well. The legislative controls that did exist centered on the control of salmonella and MBM as specified in the Disease of Animals Protein Processing. In the early 1980s, the market for rendered products was relatively mature. MBM had only one application as an ingredient in animal feeds, where it was widely used in the diets of most farm animals. Its key attribute was high protein, relatively good amino acid balance, particularly for pigs and poultry. For ruminants, the protein had low rumen degradability, which was important to increase undegradable protein supply and satisfy the requirement of high-producing animals. In the UK, the use of high UDP feedstuffs was particularly relevant as dairy farmers were trying to increase milk yields and production prior to the imposition of milk quotas. In the mid-1980s, MBM was included in ruminant rations up to 70 grams kg -1 dm. As a consequence of this outbreak epidemic, the market for bovine beef products and rendered products collapsed, the former resulting from failing customer confidence and the latter resulting from a variety of restrictions placed on the use of rendering products. The EU ban on use of animal-derived proteins in animal feeds effectively eliminated the market for MBM and other proteins. As a result, MBM became a very undesirable commodity, and its value dropped from approximately 150 pounds per ton to close to zero. With no valuable markets for rendered products in the UK, government and some EU countries intervened with financial support to ensure that the rendering industry could continue to operate and provide a service to the livestock and meat industries. However, following the loss of the markets for rendered products, the rendering industry was forced to change its business tactics, and the costs associated with ABP processing were passed down the chain, with the ultimate recipient, farmers receiving lower prices for their livestock.